Dave Birkett here, along with Carlos Monarrez, Shawn Windsor, as usual, for our Monday wrap-up of the Detroit Lions. And guys, Lions lost the game to the Green Bay Packers on Sunday. I don't think any of us expected them to win. Certainly, they were overmatched in that game. Give them a little bit of credit, though, I guess, for making a game of it, at least after it appeared that they were going to get run out of the building the way that Aaron Rodgers was playing them early on. So, I don't know, do you take any solace in the effort, or Carlos, I know you prefer them to lose at this point for draft pick status.
Yeah, they moved up one spot in the draft order, so that was a little, silver lining. Dave, this is a moral victory for the Lions. I know it's a big deal for you. So definitely a moral victory. It's a pat on the back, participation trophy. But yeah, I mean, people, like you said, they thought they were going to get drug around the field, and they didn't. They held it together. They gave themselves a chance at the end. Like the way Bevel fought with throwing that challenge flag, which I thought that was a catch, by the way. I like that.
Apparently.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fight that they showed. They were clearly outmatched talent-wise, personnel-wise, with all the injuries the Lions had, especially on defense. So, they did what they could, but it's just there's only so much magic you're gonna pull out of the bag this late in the season. So at this point, I think we're gonna get into it, but sit Stafford, tank the rest, move up a couple more spots in the draft order.
Shawn, you want Stafford to take a seat for the rest of the season, regardless of what comes from the injury?
No, and I don't think he does. I don't think he wants to either. Hey, while I'm talking for a second, Dave, if you mind, pull up that tweet so you can read it here in a few seconds about not about Carlos. We can get to that, but you tweeted out this idea that had they changed coaches, a little earlier, they might be a legitimate wild card contender, and I'd like to bat that around a little bit. In fact, because I'm worried that Carlos is going to create some heat here, so I think I'm gonna take my coat off and my hat off so I won't get burned by the sparks.
All right. So I'll dig up exactly what I said.
But I think Carlos, is talking about moral victories. It's sort of shocking that he's talking about that. He's talking about draft position. Let's be real. Carlos wanted him to lose because he wants Matt Patricia to not look as bad, right? I mean, if they win, you know what I mean? Especially if they beat a team like the Packers, you know what I mean? Then Carlos is kind of licking his wounds a little bit. So can we be honest about that, Carlos?
Look, I just want everyone to know that I came in here I didn't want to talk about Matt Patricia at all today. I didn't, I just wanted to spin this.
Oh yeah,
and that's where we end up at, like 2 minutes into our video here.
It's funny because I'm not the one who ever brings him up, but we always end up talking about your guys' favorite coach. I think you guys miss him. I think there's buyer's remorse as much as you guys are on Team Bevel now. Like you're like, oh, remember Matt Patricia? It's gonna go on forever. But no, I mean this is it's ridiculous to play the what if game. Hey, if Bevel finishes, even 4-1 in the last 5 games, I'll even say 3-2, Dave. You could make the argument that, yeah, maybe there was something there, but it's not like this team is that much different. Hanging with the Patriots, a 3-possession third quarter is not exactly the kind of thing that makes you think, oh my God, Darrell Bevel was the answer this whole time. So I don't buy that. And let's not forget when they got handled in Green Bay the first time, Stafford, one of the big turning points is Stafford throwing that pick 6, which of course was Matt Patricia's fault. So, we can play this what if game, but Bevel's done an okay job. And I wrote that. I think that, if he ends up, winning a few more games, he should maybe get some consideration. I don't know in this hiring cycle, but maybe down the line. I think, maybe there's something there, not this year, but maybe in the future.
Well, a couple thoughts, Carlos. Sorry, Dave. One, I was at that game sitting next to our good bud Dave in Green Bay, and they were kind of getting run before that pick 6. That was not a very good pick 6, by the way. You're right. But 2, the team. What was weird about yesterday was it just felt like a regular loss. They didn't implode. They didn't lose it. Green Bay was just a little bit better, but they played like professionals. They played. Obviously they were engaged and all that. They didn't beat themselves in a way, which they have so much over the last few years. Maybe you could argue, Carlos, they have over the last 50 years. But it does feel a bit different. The question is, and I saw this as Dave's going to read this tweet here in a minute. In that thread, the Twitter thread that Dave's going to reference, there was somebody posting an article about from 538, the political site, and they did a sort of a study looking at when coaches get fired, do teams have an immediate bounce? And oftentimes they do, and you wonder, okay, is it the coach that comes in? Because a lot of times that coach doesn't get rehired or doesn't get hired at the end of the season as a full-time coach. They remain an interim and then they go their way. But is it just because the coach that was fired was just not doing a very good job? And maybe part of that was connecting communication. So maybe that explains the bounce that you see. So I'd be willing to say that makes sense, Carlos. And it's not just Darrell Bevell. Maybe it's just the nature of when that happens. But I also think Bevell deserves some credit for the imprint, the footprint, whatever, not the footprint, what he's done in the last couple of weeks. How about that?
I think that's very fair.
I think that.
Go ahead, Carlos. I'm gonna give you the floor here.
Yeah, just real quick, just let's not forget 538's the really prescient website that predicted Hillary would run over Donald Trump in 2016. So
that was in the error margin, by the way. I'm just saying the popular vote. So
yeah,
whatever.
Well, the problem with these, and I think Dave wrote about it, or he referenced it recently about the bounce from coaches and their records the week after were something like 13-8 or whatever it was in the last few years. But the problem with that is, you have to look at the whole circumstance. Are you playing the Jets the next week? Are you playing, the Packers the next week? And it's really an apples and oranges thing. Maybe there is something to it. But I don't know. I mean, that's you can say that Bevell is doing a credible job. I don't know if he's the difference maker that anybody's looking for right now. I don't know if he would have made. I mean, I don't know. We can play this what if game the whole time. Let's not forget two things. One, the offense was not playing great under Matt Patricia, and Darrell Bevell was in charge of that offense. And two, last year when Stafford missed half the year, they were doing what they're doing now, was they were not getting embarrassed for the most part with David Blau, under center. So, you can play this moral victory thing and this, they don't look too bad in the defeats. That's not really what you want in a head coach ultimately. So no matter who you're playing, but they did what they could yesterday. It was, they just were outmanned.
Absolutely outmanned. And I'm going to read you before we get to my tweet that you want to talk about, Shawn. I want to read you this. This is from the memo that Sheila Fordham sent to some employees today. It was talking about the GM search and sort of outlining some things, but she also said, it was clear that Coach Patricia's system was not working for the Lions. We have, important football games left. We're confident in Bevell. It goes on to say, hey, as we were leaving the Bears stadium after last week's win, we heard thunderous applause and laughter flowing out of the Lions locker room, something we have not heard for a long time. And even after our hard-fought loss to the Packers yesterday, it was evident the team played with heart and never gave up. I mean, look, whatever the case is, certainly some of it is just the change, as you guys said. You have to give Bevell a little bit of credit. I've said all along, right? I don't think he's going to end up being the head coach for this team, or maybe even not a serious candidate for this team. But the team has responded to him on a different level than it did to Matt Patricia, and I think that's evident to everyone watching. So the tweet that you wanted to talk about, Shawn, though, was, I said I was just rewatching a little bit of the game this morning, and I said this defense is bereft of talent, because it really is, as you said, Carlos. I mean, there just are not playmakers on that side of the ball, and when you go up against a Packers team like the Lions faced yesterday, I mean, you have to pull some rabbits out of the hat to win. But beyond that, I said I can't help but think that if the Lions had made this head coaching change sooner, I just got out of it. If they made this head coaching change sooner, they'd have a couple more wins and be a legitimate wild card contender. So I don't know. Let's munch on that for a second. Had they made this change, let's say bye week, at some point, would they be a legitimate playoff contender now? I don't think they would be a great team by any means, but maybe they beat Carolina. Maybe they beat Houston. I mean, maybe there's the way players have responded to Darrell Bevell, at least leads me to believe that the Lions would, they'd have another win or two under their belts right now had this change been made earlier.
Go ahead.
Well,
go ahead, Carlos.
I see him laughing.
Yeah,
too.
I love this is a Dave. You should give a class in debate strategy, because you set up this fake premise of They're responding to Bevel. Anytime an NFL team wins, they are laughing and cheering. You know, we walk past locker rooms all the time and we wait. You can hear, it doesn't matter who you beat. If you're the whatever, the Saints or the Packers, and you beat the Jets, you're going to be celebrating in the locker room. You're going to give game balls. It's a big occasion, no matter who you play, when you play. I'm sure when the Lions beat the Falcons, I'm sure that Patricia didn't say, hey, everybody shut up. No celebrating. Let's keep it down. Quiet, boys. We've been in those locker rooms with Patricia, under Patricia, when they've beaten teams. It's a joyous affair. It's a celebration. No matter who the coach is, no matter who you hate, whatever it is, you won a game. You just left some blood out on the field and you won that game. You're going to be happy. So that's one kind of ridiculous. And the second one is, you know, yeah, you can play this what if game all day long. Well, I wonder if, I don't know. I'd like to hear Shawn and Dave, like, why do you think Bevel would have led them to more victories? Like, what can you point to?
Well,
he's not Patricia.
Yeah, that's the main thing. There are a couple thoughts I have. First of all, Carlos is basically saying Sheila Ford Hemp is misremembering or suffering some kind of recency bias, because what she heard in Chicago was,
yes,
she'd forgotten that what she'd heard, the previous 3 years. I don't buy that. To me, she's plenty smart enough to understand that the difference in sound, and to put that in a memo suggests that, you know what I mean? The other thing that says is that, and maybe she wants a proven head coach, whatever. The other thing that says, though, is that it's not just going to be about a coach who can draw up X's and O's. I think that's what they've learned from this. I think the memo says that. I think the last two games have proven that. Even in yesterday's loss, it was a painful loss in a way for Lions fans because of how long Rodgers had the ball and the Packers had the ball, especially in that third quarter drive that was almost 9 minutes. Carlos, we're talking about that during the game, and then almost 8 minutes or in the late third and early in the fourth. So that was kind of painful, but the way they responded after that, just the way they played, it didn't feel like a normal, inevitable Lions loss, even though we were wondering early on, and Dave alluded to this, that it felt kind of like it might be a blowout. And I think it would have been like what happened in Green Bay, to be honest with you. But to me, the main takeaway is, do you want somebody that can connect with your people, and how important that is? And what's the percentage of that in a coach versus like Mike Vrabel, right? He obviously knows football, but he's connected. He's gone down there, and he's a very different kind of personality than Patricia. Maybe it's because he was a player. I don't know. But I think
Vrabel is the same personality. He is the same person as Patricia.
No, Shawn.
No, he's not.
He is a hard-ass player. Right. Yes. He was the guy who took it to Patricia. Probably learned how to be kind of a jerk from Vrabel in those meetings.
Don't confuse Vrabel being kind of standoffish with media, which he's done a little bit down there, with what he's doing in the locker. Come on, Dave, help me out here.
Look, Shawn is. I think Shawn is. I'll give you Carlos. I'll give you the floor in 1 sec. Shawn, I think you're exactly right about noticing that and wanting that in your next head coach, because if there's anything that we've learned from this failed Patriots experiment here, it's that those relationships matter. And you can look at, why was Jim Caldwell considered? Why was he so loved in that locker room? It wasn't necessarily because he was great at X's and O's. People will tell you that he wasn't. That wasn't his strong suit. But it was connecting with people and getting people to play for him. And I think the talent level in the NFL, again, you take out the Chiefs, who are at the top of everything, right? And you take out the Jaguars and the Jets, who are at the bottom when it comes to talent. So many teams are in that middle of the pack, that what really makes a difference for teams, the teams that win and the teams that don't, is some of those intangibles in getting your guys to play for you and to buy into your system and to believe in you is such a big part of that. And there's no disputing that players did not do that under Matt Patricia in his 2.5 seasons here.
But having said that, look, and I don't want to compare Patricia. Sorry, Carlos, it's your floor here in a second. I don't want to compare Patricia to Bill Belichick, but Belichick struggled with that a little bit in Cleveland, right? And he talked about, if he got another chance, he's gone back and talked about that, he was going to make some changes. So if Patricia were to ever get another chance, I guarantee you he would change the way he entered the organization and how he tried to connect. Because he's too smart not to, right? And you learn, and that's okay. And it's not to say that Patricia's a bad guy. Sometimes you just kind of have to figure out what matters right away. And I just think that that's what's going to drive this coaching search as much as anything.
Yeah, the thing with this, the coaching things, and mean guys, nice guys, all this stuff. I got to answer somebody on Twitter like, I guess you don't want, you don't want Vince Lombardi, you don't want Bill Belichick, you don't want Tom Landry, because those are big meanie coaches. And I think this is the question that I have for the owner for Sheila Ford Hamp is, every coach comes in there and they have their, this is what I'm going to do, whatever. I don't think they get down to the really microscopic level, the granular level of, I'm going to be a jerk to these players. It's going to be very top heavy management. I don't think they spell that out until they get into the seat. But that was the issue with Patricia, was a very top heavy management style. And like all the players, the one thing that all the players said, by the way, the current players for the Lions after Patricia was fired, was it's because he didn't win. At the end of the day, they don't really care what the style is if it works. You can be Satan, but if you're leading a winning charge every week, they're going to fall in line behind you. That's why Belichick doesn't have a lot of dissension. But if you're bad, if you're,
why didn't they win?
It's like we're putting up with all this garbage, all this, stuff, and we're losing. So that's why it doesn't work. That's why Landry stayed in power and all these coaches, right? Belichick and Lombardi, whatever. So that's the question for Sheila is, who do you want? Do you just want a nice person? Do you want somebody who's going to do the kumbaya Caldwell thing that got you back to 9-7 and right on the edge of the playoff bubble all the time? Or do you want just somebody that has a clear vision? Because to me, I guarantee you, if you'd interviewed Mike Vrabel and Matt Patricia, they would have come off very similar, because they were both coming in, they were both beloved by their players or their former, players, whatever, that they were in charge of. So you're not going to hear this dissension or whatever. Now, if you hire a guy who has been a coach before, then maybe you have a little bit more track record of how did he run that organization. But if you're going for a first time head coach, you're not going to know that until they get into the seat, how exactly they run the team.
Well, I don't think she was saying that's the only thing they're going to judge him on. I think to Sean's point, that's got to be part of it. And maybe they overlooked that last time. And it was, look, we go back the last 5 years, right? The Lions, Rod Wood, Martha Ford at the time, they had no experience running any sort of search. So they just turned it over to Ernie Accorsi, who hired, his buddy's friend, underling Bob Quinn, who hired his friend, and Matt Patricia. And I don't think Rod and Sheila, to the extent that she was involved, and Martha maybe knew exactly what they were looking for at the time. And now that they've been through this, they realize that, hey, those relationships, they matter. Like, yes, you have to have a vision. Yes, you have to be able to command a room. Yes, you have to have a presence about you and maybe being a good X's and O's coach or surround yourself with a great staff. And certainly players are important. But one thing that also matters is those relationships that you have in the locker room and in the building. They can take you a long way.
They can. I mean, even down to the meeting rooms, right, in the film sessions, and how are you going to convey information? And it's going to stick in a different way depending on how it's conveyed. And to say Vrabel and Patricia are exactly the same, I don't buy it. You've watched the Titans play, Dave. So have you, Carlos. And you can see on the sideline, Vrabel has his hands on guys. And it's been that way from the start he was there. His energy, how he relates to him when somebody's running off the field, it's just different. Now, maybe it's because he was a player. I'm not saying you have to be that way. But the guys you're referencing, Carlos, that's a different era, man. Free agency wasn't even around back when Lombardi was playing, right? The players are a lot more empowered. The culture has changed to a large degree. You can't just scream and get away with it. You can and not do anything else. You can scream. There's a coach up the road in East Lansing who screams, but he also has the very next play his arm around the player, right? I mean, so you got to balance that out. But you're referencing guys, to me, Carlos, that won in a way when the times are a little bit different. And that's okay. I understand. You want to go back to 1977. I mean, maybe in some ways I do too. Oh, I'd like to go eat Count Chocula and be able to find it in every grocery store all year long myself.
Well, unless I heard that Bill Belichick was fired, I believe he's still coaching. But yeah, that's I don't know if you were watching Patricia on the sideline, Sean, because he definitely gave guys pats on the back and hugged them. He coached them up on the side. That was one of the first things I remember tweeting when he was coaching, he liked to coach the DBs and whatever, when they were off the field, and people loved it. They could be, because remember, Caldwell was like a statue. They hated that Caldwell just stood there and seemed emotionless. So Patricia was more emphatic. I mean, I don't know about Vrabel if he's doing jumping jacks and cartwheels, whatever, but Patricia was emotive, So I don't know if that's you're remembering his, his style quite right.
I think he changed a little bit. He had to, right? He did get a
No,
little
he
bit
was like
better.
that from the
I'll
beginning.
back Carlos up on this.
I mean, Dave, go back
I
and
remember
read
going
Dave's
to
stories when.
New England. I'm sorry, Carlos. I just want to back you up. I remember going to New England for that AFC Championship game when it was apparent the Lions were going to hire him. He went player by player, shook everyone's hand, gave him a hug. I mean, there was some of that from Patricia, but I think it was more. It wasn't just that. There was more about how he treated him that players didn't like. But Carlos is right that Matt was, he was emotive in many ways.
They're never gonna hire a coach who's going to get all these bad reviews of, man, he was a jerk to us, and man, he cussed us out in meetings and we didn't like it. They come here on a high point, and that high point, I'm sure Patricia did this in New England as well. I'm sure he was tough on his players in his meeting rooms as well. But guess what? They were always winning in New England. So people are, well, this isn't my favorite style, but guess what? We're winning. It's working.
And that's the only example. He's the only example, right, Carlos? That's the problem. You're trying to replicate somebody that there's nobody else in the league like him. And I think that's the other lesson. I mean, Vrabel is part of the tree, but he's very different from Belichick. And so, I don't know. Look, I'm not saying Patricia wasn't emotive. And you're right. It's not just the sideline. It's also inside the building and how you're going to treat. But there were too many players that talked about maybe he didn't threaten them, but the way he would talk about it made it sound like they didn't think that he was treating them like a human being or an adult or somebody, hey, what was it? It was an Shawn Robinson that tweeted, not that I want to reference him, but this idea that he was threatened with his career or whatever. Maybe that's a little over the top, but he gave too many players the idea that they were just pawns and not, sort of blood and water and sweat and all that. And that, to me, he can change, because you're right, Carlos. We did see that from Patricia when he was in New England.
Yeah, no, I look, I think it's all about, they're playing a little more loose now, but that's, beside the point, right? I mean, again, I didn't want to spend this whole time talking about Patricia. I wanted to move on to some other things and, talk about Darrell Bevel and the job that he's done, or talk about the GM search and the coaching search that we're still very much in the infancy of. We only have a couple minutes left here on Zoom before we get kicked off. So, before we have to go, do you guys have any thoughts on, as I watch these games now, right? Last night I get home from Ford Field and I'm watching the Buffalo Bills play, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, Brian Daboll, potential head coach, Leslie Frazier, potential head coach, Joe Shane, I don't know if I'm saying the last name right, in the front office. I'm thinking of these guys and how they might fit into the Lions organization. So before we wrap this up, do you have any early thoughts? And again, the Lions are weeks away, potentially 6 weeks away from making hires. Do you have any thoughts on, how you'd like to see this thing shake out? What candidates you'd like to see in the mix at the end of the day?
Well, I'll just tell you, Carlos and I were talking about this. Sorry, Carlos, yesterday during the game, kind of looking at the roster and giving Bob Quinn some credit, or maybe that's not the right word, but his hits were on the offensive side of the ball, right? He drafted 4 or 5 guys, maybe 5 or 6 guys, several of them who were Pro Bowl level players. So whoever comes in next has got to figure out how to do that on the defensive side of the ball. That was the difference yesterday. Rodgers had all day to throw, and Stafford did not. If you want to boil that game down, yes, Rodgers is a better player than Stafford. That's fine. But aside from that, Stafford played pretty well yesterday. But that was the difference. The front 7 on either side, you can see the difference. And that's been an issue all year. There's no pass rush. I know they were missing a couple of guys, but even when they had those guys, there was very low pass rush. So the next GM is going to have an eye on how to balance this roster out, because I think offensively they're in decent shape.
Yeah, I think my one thing is, to start off, the biggest thing is going to be the quarterback position, because it looks more and more like Stafford is out the door, in some way or fashion, either by trade or by injury or something, right? So the new regime is about the future, and that starts with the quarterback. So someone like Dave and I have talked about this, like a John Dorsey in Cleveland, right? And came from Kansas City. Somebody who has an eye for developing or finding quarterback talent. It's really hard to do that, right? Especially if you're not picking 1 or 2, or even if you are picking that high, it's hard. So someone who can put together, and I know Shawn, defense, that was Quinn's problem, but to me, offense is more important. You got to score points. So who is it going to be? What's your vision for this roster, specifically offense? offense is going to change quite a bit as well, with the guys leaving in free agency and everything. So I don't know if it's John Dorsey, but I think someone with an eye for quarterback talent is going to be.
I'll break some news. I'm sorry. I'll break some news to people in here. The Lions have not contacted John Dorsey yet. So just putting that out there, though. Carlos, we have talked about that his resume in drafting quarterbacks is not, it's one of the better ones out there with everyone he's had a hand in. But I agree with both of you that I think, Sean, you're right. I mean, Bob Quinn has done a good job with the offensive line. You look at Kenny Galladay, DeAndre Swift. I mean, they have some pieces on offense that you can look at. Hawkinson, for sure. They have some pieces that are going to be good players and should make this offense a good offense for a long time. They have no playmakers on defense. They really need to turn that whole unit over. And Carlos, look, that's what I'm writing for tomorrow about Matthew Stafford. I mean, it is regardless of whether Stafford comes back in 2021 or not. And I think, if you're picking 10-ish, you probably got to bring him back because you can't just throw next season to the Wolves. But look, the one failing of this past regime, the biggest failing, was not drafting a quarterback and not setting yourself up for that. In the next regime, that has to be the first order of business, because as we saw, Stafford takes another big hit. Who knows what his status is going forward? But he's been hurt a lot lately, right? 2018, he had the back that he played through. 2019, he missed 8 games with the back injury. This year, he's got the thumb that he's playing through, the ribs now that may or may not keep him out. You go back even further, 17, I think he had some injuries. So they need to find their quarterback of the future, because at this rate, who knows how long Matthew Stafford will continue to last. And rather than give him an extension, rather than roll with him until he's 40, I think that's a position that the next GM has to address early, probably first round in this coming draft.
I agree with both of you. Although I really will say, I think they could be pretty competitive next year if Stafford comes back with the right GM and right coach.
Well, I agree.
And some smart free agency.
But not Super Bowl
defense.
Yeah.
No. But I think they could be playoff level competitive if they can get that defense a little bit better. And we see teams do this all the time. It just depends on who they bring in, and they're going to be able to identify that. Long term, yeah, they got to have a quarterback, but I think they could be pretty good the next couple of years if they can just get that defense a little bit better, maybe a lot better.
Carlos, since I said you were crazy on Twitter, you get the last word before we wrap this up here.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't say you guys are crazy, because you're right. This team is not totally bereft of talent, and I think I'll take exception with what you said on defense, Dave. I think Romeo Quara, Trey Flowers, Jamie Collins, those guys are pretty good players. I mean, they'll have a place on this defense next year. So, they still need more. Okuda should be better next year, all that. But there are holes, definitely a lot of holes on defense. But they have something to go on. But they definitely need a lot of help.
You're right on Romeo, free agent. That's a big decision that the Lions have, and they might not have the franchise tag to use on him if they have to use it on Kenny Galladay. So we'll see. And Trey Flowers injured right now, so bereft right now. All right, that'll do it for us here. We're going to get kicked off of Zoom here in a second. So as always, a great conversation with these two guys, and I'm sure we'll have more to come as the Lions have 3 games left, including this week against the Tennessee Titans. For Carlos Monarrez, Shawn Windsor, I'm Dave Birkett, Freep.com.